Hi, and welcome to Life Science Solutions, a Kymanox podcast. Join us as we explore the journey of modern medicines, ensuring every product reaches its full potential in safety, quality, and accessibility. I'm your host, Chris Adkins. Today, we are at CED Venture Connect in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we're getting an insider's perspective on the venture capital decision-making process. Our guest today, Dave Ousterout, co-founder and general partner at CapeFear Biocapital, which is a pre-seed fund focused exclusively on North Carolina life science companies. As someone who's been on both sides of the table, first as a scientist and entrepreneur who raised over $150 million for his own company, and now as an investor, Dave offers unique insights into what makes startups stand out to potential funders. In this episode, we'll dig into how investors evaluate opportunities, what they look for in operational teams, and the specific criteria CapeFear uses when deciding where to place their capital. Let's get into it. Well, Dave, thanks for joining us on the Life Science Solutions podcast. Really excited to talk with you and dial in a little bit about CapeFear Biocap and what you guys are working on, but would love to hear a little bit to start out with about your background and kind of how you landed here in the venture space.
Yeah, awesome, Matt. And thanks again for having us on here. It's great to tell a little bit of the story of what we're trying to do here in North Carolina. My background is I'm a scientist by training. We were talking a little bit before this, but I did my PhD over at Duke.
Yep.
Great season so far. Hope the boys bring it home.
Yep.
And I was studying genetic engineering over there. So really CRISPR before CRISPR was even around. So I always have to have that little claim to fame that we were doing it before it was cool.
Yep.
I worked in the lab of Charlie Gersbach, who started a number of different companies. Really fortunate to have had him as a mentor. And then he mentored me so well, I left academia entirely. Just kidding, Charlie. And went to McKinsey for a couple of years. And there I did a little bit of everything because I was just really interested in this intersection of business and science. And I figured a good way to do that was just get completely out of science. That thankfully led me back here to RTP, and I co-founded a company out of state called Locus Bio. And I served there as a founding CSO for 6 years. It was really awesome experience. We took that from a petri dish into a phase 2 trial, raised over $150 million by the time I had left. And when I stepped down just about 3 years ago now, thought about, what's next? And that's a little bit where sort of the CapeFear story starts is for folks like me that have built biotechs and decided, what's coming next? What are we going to go do? Really isn't a lot in the R&D space. There's a ton. We were talking before this about, CDMO, CRO. That's a huge strength of ours. But when it comes to just R&D, I talk with, my former colleagues and other folks in the space. What makes startup life here challenging is they often end, and that's okay. Usually because you can walk across the street and get something else.
Yep.
And I think that's a little bit of the ecosystem challenge we have and what we're setting out to help fix.
Yeah. That's excellent. And, one, I love the Locus background, right? And the mission there for that company is really solving a significant, let's say, whether it's an unmet need or certainly one in the, microbial resistant side of things, right? That really needs a lot of good work. And so it's exciting to see that work here. And certainly, we have a unique landscape here for life science innovation, right? Because there's so much commercial backbone that exists across the area. We were talking earlier about all the growth going on in Holly Springs, and a lot of that is very commercial oriented. That's been the history of the park and the kind of what we call the greater RTP area, right? As you kind of stretch maybe in our east and west, mostly east, but all of that great work going. I'm curious, what do you think makes the North Carolina landscape really unique whenever we think about it from an innovation perspective, right? For what you guys are supporting.
So I got to start by maybe the highest levels. People from North Carolina who have lived here and in the Southeast in general, we just love this place. So if you go to Boston or you go to San Francisco or you go to another hub, whether it's biotech or tech, most people we talk to look back and say, I miss that place. And people who move back say, I'm so glad I'm back. And so I think there's an aspect of just gravitation. And so on the innovation side, there's two things to hear in that. One, people are leaving. So there's sort of this green space between Duke, UNC, State, RTI, just the broader university research system we have here, and the talent that can do it, the capital that can support it. I think both capital and talent exist here and elsewhere. And our unique aspect is because we don't do enough R&D, we have the opportunity to pull it all together. It's here. We have the substrate. We have the science. We have the people. and an expert is a phone call away in the Zoom era, and there is a fondness to what we call our hometown heroes.
Yeah. And certainly, you can see it in the economic data right now. And I'm going to pick on Wake County because that's where I sit, right? But 95 people a day are moving to Wake County right now. And there's a myriad of reasons for that. Some of them are economical, but some of them I think you're spot on are because people want to live here, right?
Yeah.
And that's an advantage when it comes to talent, as opposed to I spend time in other hubs as well, right? And we hear about people sort of struggling with their commute, or they're struggling with some, maybe less business friendly economic policies, right? So we do have some distinct advantages there. So I think that's a good segue. Kind of what is the maybe uniqueness or approach for CapeFear from a fund strategy or from a thesis perspective, right? And kind of how does that differ from traditional VCs in the life sciences space? Because I think you guys have a very unique approach and you're filling a real need, right?
Yeah, thank you. And maybe I'll just start by describing what the fund does. So we are a pre-seed specialist, which is, I think, the first unique aspect that is also focused exclusively on North Carolina. Tech and team can come from anywhere, but you have to operate here.
Yep.
And so there's a geographic constraint we've placed on ourselves because we think that's part of what makes it good. It's going to take more work at the outset, finding the diamonds in the rough, so to speak. We talk about this a lot, and even those diamonds need to be polished. And that's not my perspective. That's, I think, the general consensus we hear when people challenge us. Why are you so focused on that? Why not follow a technology from Duke or UNC or state out of state?
Sure.
And the answer is, we really want to focus on the community. We think the research here can have transformative impact on patients. And we think by focusing on those things as one of the specialists, our investors will get rewarded from that.
Yeah.
So that's how the CapeFear ethos got started. What we in practice do is we write checks up to about $500,000, and we want to help catalyze pre-seed and seed rounds of $1 to $3 million in total. And we think in biotech, especially at the spin out, the earliest days, that's about 12 to 15 months. That gets you the data and the distance to the clinic that in today's markets is a bit more demanded, if not already still a step behind where most investors want you to be. But, last thing I'll say on this is I think, there's gonna be a cycle, right? It's the hot word. There's a cyclic industry. I actually think that has to be true. You hear a lot about what's happening with, licensing things out of China. I think that's, good for innovation overall. There's a word commoditization I've heard used there.
Yep.
I think the connotation is that when something is known, what you can do in China exceeds the pace. And so that's the natural reason people are bringing it over here. I think the reality for U.S. innovation is that we're still really good at coming up with the next thing.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not to say that China isn't or any other place isn't, but that's what we do well.
Yep.
And I think in North Carolina, that's our potential for the future, is being an innovation hub.
Yep.
I don't want to see things exported out to Boston after the fact, but I think if we can carve out that niche, that starting point where more companies are getting started, more things on the innovation side, inevitably some stay and inevitably we continue growing.
Yeah.
That's kind of where the fund is. That's how we're trying to do it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you see some of that innovative work, right? If we look to the gene therapy field, there's a tremendous amount of pioneering research that's come here out of the university model, right? Especially out of UNC. Even though as a state guy, it pains me there, but there's certainly good research there as well. And I think that's a good segue to, and some of this is, the blinding flash of the obvious. We all know RTP is here because of the kind of combination of the three large research-based universities and, of course, the traditionally pro-business economy and the really vision to develop that. But beyond that, what do you think are the specific strengths that the local kind of research and academic ecosystem brings forward as we're thinking about especially therapeutics development?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, maybe to start off, we're really good at med tech as well. So med tech and therapeutics, I think, particularly single assets, really understanding deeply how to target a disease and how to test that in clinical trials. We're really good at that. I mean, it's no secret, obviously, that comes from Duke and UNC having hospitals attached to them, they're research hospitals. And so I think that creates an environment, a natural sort of pull. Hey, I'm really interested in studying this. Go find a world-leading clinician that's here.
Yep.
Like the cardiovascular space is a good example of one of Duke's pieces of leadership, rare disease at UNC. And you naturally start to see those collaborations going, I think, from applied scientists.
Yep.
So when I was working in my PhD at Duke, it led us to things that different musculoskeletal diseases, DMD, and then we looked at like Pompe disease and rare disease, all because of gene editing as a platform can go many places. And so you naturally lean on the experts to help you figure out what fits.
Yeah.
And then I think the second thing is the basic research then that we do as part of that yields some of these innovations, right? I think you have to have both. I'm an applied scientist. I love applied science. I love doing things for a purpose. We talk often about CRISPR and Rodolphe Berengu here at NC State. He was the yogurt guy, right? He was figuring out how do you make yogurt not spoil and how do you protect it against these viruses, and stumbled on CRISPR.
Yeah.
And that started this revolution, right?
Yep.
So if you don't have those two things in balance, and I think that again speaks to some of the strengths of State, really innovative culture over there, not always biomedical in nature, so to speak. I think that's changing, but I think it's still, very ag and different areas of research that if we're clever, we can also use.
Correct, right? How do we think outside the box to maybe how do we apply where this was developed, and to get a great example there.
Think
right?
and do.
Exactly, right? So familiar tagline. Make sure to watch the next segment of our interview with Dave, where we dive into how investors evaluate opportunities and the specific criteria CapeFear uses when deciding where to place their capital.